Okay, hello everybody. Carmel, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, I apologize everybody for the technical problems that we were having there with the technology there and with the recording file and where this file is being sent to. It was just kind of an interesting mishap that happened. But I think we're all set now. There might be slight technical issues that come about because Carmel has noted to me that where she's at in the United Kingdom, they're having some bad storms. So if there is a sort of and there seems to be a slight sometimes delay from when I ask Carmel something and she responds. So bear with us, but we will still be able to make the most of this and make a great presentation here. So let me go ahead and begin by welcoming everybody to the VIA Pioneer Speaker Series. This is the VIA Institute's monthly free series that features leading practitioners and researchers and educators in the world who are working with character strengths. And like our distinguished speaker today, Carmel Proctor, these individuals are all pioneers. So they're doing unique things and they're pushing ideas with the science of character forward. And there's so much that we still have to learn in this science, and it's just very exciting. I just want to make a note before we move into Carmel's presentation that you can see on the screen here that the VIA Institute now has, as of the last couple weeks, a new VIA Youth report. And that goes along with a briefer VIA Youth survey that we now offer. So we just in the last couple weeks have finalized and validated a briefer youth survey that's now 4 questions per character strength, so a total of 96 questions instead of the former version, which is 198, so less than half as long. And with that, any youth, between the ages of 10 and 17 will get free results, as has always been the case with the VIA survey. And now, for the first time, youth will have the option to purchase an in-depth report that we have set for at $10. So whether it's youth or whether it's a teacher purchasing the report on their students or a parent, and so that's something that we're real excited about. And we could certainly send you. We'll have sample copies on our website that you can look at as well. So we just wanted to highlight that. And now let me move into an introduction of Carmel Proctor. So Carmel is in the UK, and she's a chartered psychologist with the British Psychological Society, and she's the director of the Positive Psychology Research Center. And she's also co-author of a book that I like a lot and use a lot called Strengths Gym, which she'll be telling you more about in this presentation. And so Strengths Gym is a character strength-based educational course for children and adolescents. And Carmel she's a researcher in this field as well. So she's done quite a bit of research in this area, and certainly in the area of positive psychology, and has done a lot of important work where she's co-authored chapters on positive psychology in schools, and has written articles on Strengths Gym and character strengths, looking at some of the science behind character strengths across different populations. She's on the editorial board for the Encyclopedia of Quality of Life Research, and her main focus in her research is around working with adolescents and youth life satisfaction. So with that, I'm very pleased to have you here, Carmel. Welcome.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for that kind introduction.
You're very welcome. If I could say one quick...
First slide.
Oh, sure. As I move to the first slide, let me also mention, I forgot to mention that you can email me any questions for Carmel. Not email on the screen there, but please email me at ryan@viacharacter.org, ryan@viacharacter.org, if you have any questions for Carmel, and I'll be happy to ask those to her throughout the session here if the question seems like it would be of good appeal to a wide variety of people. And Carmel and I will be doing a little bit of a different approach in the VIA Pioneer Speaker Series, in that we're going to make it somewhat conversational. So Carmel will be presenting slides, but also I'll be sort of making comments and asking questions. And so if we can involve any of you, we would like to do that as well. So, okay, back over to you, Carmel.
Okay, well, I prepared a little outline, which is the next slide, if you want to go on to that one. Just to sort of keep us let us know where we're going. I thought we could start with the initial considerations of the research that I had, and then which led to me conducting a review of the life satisfaction literature, and then sort of the main hypothesis which drove the development of the initial intervention, and then which led to Strengths Gym. After that, after we several slides on Strengths Gym, I thought we could just talk about applying positive psychology, and as you say, strengths in particular, interventions in schools. And then I've just got a couple of slides at the end, which just some final considerations in the field. So if you're happy to go ahead, we can go to the next slide. I've included some pictures as well. That first picture on the outline is Vancouver. And this one here is a picture of UBC at the top and SFU underneath. At UBC, I did my master's degree in measurement and evaluation research methodology. So when I was thinking about wanting to look at life satisfaction, I, having that background, immediately started to think about how I might like to measure well-being as a starting point. And so I started researching measurement, life satisfaction measurements, subjective well-being, and I was quite drawn to Huebner's Students' Life Satisfaction Scale, and particularly because it was life satisfaction, and I know I'd been at the time quite drawn to the positive psychology literature, which was just sort of at its beginning then. We're going back to approximately 2002. And I noticed and have continued to notice that life satisfaction is often used as the measure of happiness. And it fit in quite nicely with my other interests, which are sort of existential philosophy. And I couldn't find the quote that I was looking for that I wanted to include on this slide because I couldn't find the reference, but I recalled reading early on that someone saying that what could be more important as a variable than life satisfaction, what is more important than satisfaction with our own existence. And it sort of was a nice fit for me. So I started there. I decided to start really looking into life satisfaction, and if you want to go to the next slide, we can have a look at what I found just very briefly because it's be too long to present today. Basically, I wanted to
Carmel,
do an all-encompassing.
Could you make could you share the distinction between life satisfaction, well-being, and happiness? Sometimes people use all those terms pretty synonymously, and what do you think is maybe a user-friendly way of distinguishing between those three things: life satisfaction, well-being, and happiness?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. They get used interchangeably throughout the literature, and I'm currently working actually on a paper which is trying to parcel these things out. But possibly I like Diener's classification of subjective well-being, including positive and negative affect as the affective components, and life satisfaction as a cognitive component. Life satisfaction is separate from or classified. It's your cognitive appraisal. It doesn't necessarily involve your feelings and emotions at the time. It's how you view your life as a whole. Obviously, there's other ways to measure life satisfaction, such as multidimensional measures, so satisfaction in particular domains. How these differ from our conception of well-being. I think well-being is sort of the umbrella term. I particularly would like people to become a little bit more conscious of at least specifying what they mean when they mean it. If you're using life satisfaction as a measure of happiness, it's quite useful to state that outrightly, that you've decided to use life satisfaction as your measure instead of, say, the subjective happiness scale or something to that effect, which is neither life satisfaction or affect, as far as I know. I don't know if that answers your question, Ryan. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's certainly a start. So the life satisfaction you'd see as more of the cognitive component, and then subjective well-being would be cognitive and emotional component.
Yes, exactly right. Anybody interested in looking further into that should really look into Diener's work. There's quite a lot there um, of interest, and quite helpful as well for kind of making your way through distinguishing between these things. You happy for me to continue?
Yes, please.
So I decided to look at all of the life satisfaction literature, and using, as you say, wanting to be very particular about making sure I was looking for articles which specifically measured life satisfaction and were empirical in nature. I ended up reviewing 141 studies altogether. And I can't, as I say, it's too many findings to sort of talk about today, but one of the most important ones connected to the research which led to StrengthsGym was that life satisfaction was not only, as I've got there, an outcome variable and an influential predictor of positive psychological well-being, but specifically Suldo and Hubner found that it acts as a buffer against the negative effects of stress. And I was, again, wanting to sort of get a rationale behind wanting to boost life satisfaction among children and adolescents. And this finding is quite important because it specifically, I've got over on the side there, adolescents with positive life satisfaction were less likely to develop later externalizing behavior problems as a result of stressful life events than those with low life satisfaction. So looking at prevention, boosting life satisfaction across the board seemed to be very worthwhile and something that we could use to help them through the difficult times. And I focused my research on students sort of aged 11 to 14, where they do tend to take a dip in well-being and life satisfaction in particular. That picture there, I'm sorry I keep drawing your attention to pictures. That picture there is where I am now, just so you, it's the only picture in the slides, I think, of where I'm located at the moment. Happy for you to jump in or go to the next slide, Ryan.
Okay. Beautiful location that you're in. Yeah.
Shall we look at the next slide?
Yep. On the screen now is a hypothesis.
Ah, great. Thanks. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind you, I think.
That's okay.
Yeah. So the main hypothesis I started with, following looking at the life satisfaction literature, also connected to looking at Seligman's work, specifically that his study in 2005, where they showed that using signature strengths in a new way increased happiness and decreased depressive symptoms for 6 months. I started to think about what would be the effects and how long they would last if we could use the VIA strengths in the classroom, using signature strengths in a new way, or using various combinations, such as some of the suggestions in Peterson's Primer of Positive Psychology. He has quite a lot of examples there of how they can be used. And I noted that the research hadn't demonstrated the same finding among youth and young people. And so I basically wanted to see whether strength-based exercises could serve as the means to increase life satisfaction among young people in the school environment, specifically using exercises similar to those, as I say, that were in Peterson's text. I actually did contact Peterson at the time and sort of tried to get his feedback on what he thought, and he was quite keen at the time for me to adapt anything that he thought that we thought could work. And so sort of started there as a sort of starting point as to how we would come up with some exercises for the kids. So I ran 2 pilot studies, which are on the next slide. There's no questions, and want me to continue on?
Yep, absolutely. Thanks.
Okay. Well, we got off to a bit of a rocky start. Started off here in Guernsey, where I am, with 36 Year 9 students, and gave them the Students' Life Satisfaction Scale, and we did the BIA Youth Online with the Institute. And I've noted there, obviously, we were doing the original measure, 198 items. I hope that's correct.
Yes.
This study started off, although very small sample size, was a very good setup, because we had all of the children at the same time sitting in front of computers, all being supervised, had parental consent for everyone. It was a really good, as I say, although it was a small sample, it was a really good place to start. And the idea was that they would do the VIA, and then we would get back the top 5 signature strengths. And I'd created a bunch of sample exercises, enough that I would get back all of the results and be able to give each student a corresponding exercise for their particular individualized top 5 strengths. And unfortunately, it didn't end up going well, because although they were being supervised, I think a lot of the students just started exiting at different points. And when I got the report back from the VIA Institute, it showed just a gradual drop-off as they got closer to the final items. So in the end, unfortunately, we only had 9 students that completed all of the 198 items. We thought we would at least try to continue with them, so we matched those with 9 students who didn't, and used them as controls. The students were each provided with the individualized worksheets. As you can imagine, still quite time-consuming to do an individualized study with them. But it really just didn't work getting them to do the exercises this way. They didn't log back in when the date was set for them to go back to the lab and log back in and do their measures again to follow up. They didn't. So that study was just completely canceled, and I'm sharing that, I think, today, because I think we often don't see the failures as well as the successes sometimes. But what I did find was that all of the students who had participated, their life satisfaction was in the positive range, and life satisfaction was related to humor, citizenship, open-mindedness, kindness, love, leadership, and perspective. So that was at least a starting point. This prompted me to want to try to run the study a little bit differently. What I learned was that it would be better if we could do the VIA paper and pencil, and it would be better if the exercises were completed with myself present to facilitate the exercises and sort of get a better feel as to what works with the kids. So we ran a second, I say we, myself and the school, ran a second pilot study, and this time with the permission of VIA, they sat a paper and pencil, which was scored by me, and this worked very well, actually. Instead of focusing on an individualized assignment of strengths exercises, we gave them the feedback of their top 5, asked them to choose the exercises out of a small booklet, which the PSHE teacher I was working with suggested that it would be better if we created little Microsoft Word type booklets for them to use with my exercises in, as the individual sheets were a bit cumbersome. And I created those, and we worked on them together. And we had 4 one-hour sessions, which went very well, where we worked first session was in the school library, and we worked on curiosity, love of learning. Second session, we did an art room session where they created cards for people they loved, and we worked on creativity, love, kindness. We went in the library again for another session. We did a session in the drama room where we did meditation and spirituality. As I say, working with them in this way was much more successful from the sort of research side. However, again, the results were sort of a bit disappointing because the school had assigned the groups, and it was clear from looking at the data that the experimental group that was chosen for me to work with had significantly lower life satisfaction at the start. They had that lower life satisfaction at baseline, post-test, and at the 1-week follow-up, and they were all significantly different. So it was clear that there were obviously pre-existing and enduring differences between the groups, which were making it impossible for us, especially with the small amount of students, to see any real differences. However, I did again learn quite a bit about how to develop a measure, or to develop what we were going to do further from working with them, and happy to go on and talk about that if
Sure. Yeah.
Brian.
Just a comment. It's great to see that you kind of are noting when something doesn't work as well, because often all people emphasize is what does work. So I'm glad that you're putting kind of both sides of the table. And I don't know if you'll talk about this later, but you note for the pilot study too that there was different strength booklets that the experimental group did, and I don't know if it would be maybe useful to just give us a small little overview. I'll move it to the next slide as well, but a small overview of what what those booklets consisted of?
The booklets were, as I say, made them myself in Microsoft Word. Quite basic, really, but just a regular sort of piece of paper, but folded down into small booklets, as I say, all made by me. But what they had is very similar to the way Strengths Gym is today. As I say, it led me right towards creating the materials which we have available. I do have those on my website for people to see, so that each student has a small booklet which on each page they have one strength and the exercises which they're to complete, and a space to work on as well. So they were sort of the foundation of what we have now, but made by myself instead of professionally made, if that makes sense. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I see what you mean. And then certainly it'd be interesting to note like what some of those maybe specific exercises are, but I think you'll be getting to that at a later slide.
In the original, actually I do have that here, funnily enough. I didn't think you'd ask me that, but yeah, in the initial booklets we covered, we weren't able to cover everything, but I did include all 24 strengths, but there wasn't so many exercises for them to do or to choose from. And under some virtues, I grouped them. So, for instance, on one page we just have justice, and under justice they have teamwork, fairness, and leadership. And they would have questions like, I think I'm a good team player because everyone deserves it fairly, no matter what, because. And in these booklets, it was much more about getting them to note down. I was looking to see what responses we got on each of these strengths, so that we could sort of see what worked and what didn't work. So the initial booklets are much more of that nature, where we're sort of asking a bit more feedback on what they think. And
Gotcha.
For instance, for curiosity, it says, I made a visit to the library. I had 15 minutes to find out about something that interested me, that I had always wanted to know more about, and explain the rest of the group what I found out. That's one of the things that we did together in the library. So the book very much corresponded with what I was doing on the days, as I say, and they were handmade. So it was fascinating to get all of them back and have you know, some of the kids had written so much, and it was just so interesting and so informative and sort of moving forward with the project. I have to say the two pilot studies, although statistically speaking, and I know statistics aren't everything, but developmentally for doing something in schools, they were essential. Without them, I think you could consider them a failure because we didn't find anything out statistically, but on the other hand, they were vital. So that's why I thought I would share them today, because without having done these, I don't think we could have created what we ended up getting to as you've got up here, which is Strixjum, up to getting actual books created. So several conclusions from the pilot studies that, you know, especially one of the big things was the effect of the children being just one classroom and not a whole year group. That seemed to make a big difference. If you're going to apply a program in a school but only one class is doing it, you have a lot of playground interference, I guess I might call it, where the students are going out on the playground and the other children are asking, why are you participating in that? What are you doing? I think it's much better if something like, and I know I'm not alone in this opinion, that it has to be at the very least a whole year approach, if not a whole school approach when you're working with strengths. It has to be a general application across the board, which will work best. I moved away at this point, sorry to say, from the VIA Youth because of its length, and decided to allow the children to endorse their strengths right inside the cover of each booklet. So instead I took each strength definition and presented those to the students and asked them to read the list and the definitions and to choose 5 that they felt were their top 5, and ended up developing 3 levels of the program, which I will get to later. But they were also then at the end able to reevaluate whether they felt, after looking at all 24, whether they felt that the 5 that they chose at the beginning were still the ones that they would choose after they've had a chance to work on all 24. Also went on, obviously, to want to make the booklets, since they were such a success, look more professional and look much more like published materials, so that the students didn't feel like they were presented with something which wasn't real materials, in hopes that this would help get away from the feelings of being in a study. And I realized that we needed a teacher's manual to help the teachers administer this, because I wouldn't be able to be, as I was with the second pilot study, with them every day. And I know you've previously had Jenny Fox-Eads, I think, do a series. This is at this point where Jenny came on board to help with the development of the program, as she's a very experienced teacher. And that's sort of how we became joined at that point. Are you happy for me to go on to the next slide?
Sure.
Okay. So eventually, after I haven't said, but this whole process has sort of it was a three-year endeavor to get to the point where we could run a large study with printed publications, booklets printed properly for the students. And at this point, the school here in Guernsey was still willing to participate, and we also, through kindly, Jenny Fox-Eads had a school she was working with in the UK who provided the bulk of the 319, because they were much larger schools. We were able to use 2 year groups to get around some of the issues we've had with just using one classroom. 1 year group provided control for the study. I decided to include self-esteem, which I had measured previously in the second pilot study, and I wanted to look at affect. As I mentioned before, positive and negative affect and life satisfaction together enable you to look at subjective well-being as a whole. So I wanted to look at that as well. due to obviously the constraints of working with the schools and the time that they have available, we were only allotted the second term sort of after Christmas, which gave us sort of just 6 months to use the materials. And unfortunately, again, overall, some teachers made it through all of the exercises, and obviously some made it through very few, but the average completion was quite low, only 23.25%. We hoped for 50, because considering that Strengths Gym has 24 exercises and lesson plans, that you would hope at 6 months it could get through approximately 50%, and we reached half of that. So a little bit disappointing on the completion, but it didn't seem to affect the results. We got our result that we were looking for. Participants of the program definitely using various statistical methods, finally, which ended up in a hierarchical linear model, we were able to show even if you control first school and year as covariates at the classroom level, you still find that those who participated at higher levels of life satisfaction. Unfortunately, the effect on positive affect was only marginal, and there was no effect on negative affect or self-esteem. But as I say, results did suggest that the intervention did increase life satisfaction.
So, Carmel, do you think that the individuals didn't, they only completed about a quarter of going through the particular character strengths, but yet still had some good results in terms of increased life satisfaction? Do you think that that speaks to that the importance really is just that the child works on a strength? It doesn't really matter what strength it is, just the fact that they're working on strengths is positive and helpful. Is that one thing that we would maybe take from this research?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that can be taken away, and something that I believe Peterson said ages ago, that or could have been Seligman, that working on strengths in general seems to have a positive impact. And the fact that when they did work on it, they worked on a whole, they had time to spend, and as I say, the exercises were developed further to getting them doing actual tasks. So, which I have an example of coming up in a few slides. But I think, as you say, just the focus on strengths, Jenny says you get more of what you focus on. I think that that's something that could be taken away here, that looking at something positive has a positive effect.
Right. Yeah, and kind of a related point that might not come up later, so maybe I'll just ask it now. What about in terms of working on signature strengths? So those strengths that the child or youth believes is most strong and most energizing and most core to who they are, versus other strengths. So I know some, as you've come across, certainly, but I'll speak for the United States, that there's many institutions in the United States, and often education institutions, where that institution will say, you should, we're going to train our students in these 5 strengths. Say, we're going to train everybody on fairness, kindness, bravery, and then maybe something like respect or responsibility. And so then all the students get the exact same thing. And I wonder about the difference between that kind of approach, which is a little bit more authoritarian driven, because it's telling people how they should be, versus an approach that kind of fosters and helps individualize to the child's uniqueness. So the signature strength approach would be about kind of looking at helping to discover what is highest in the child or youth, and how can they help that and use that more in their daily life. So I would wonder about I don't know if you've done any research on anything related to that kind of distinction between you've got to boost these particular strengths versus whatever the signature strengths are, let's get more savvy with that.
Yeah, I don't have any research of my own, but my general feeling after having done what I've done and what I've seen in the literature is I really do believe there's a benefit to them looking at all 24, even if some of them are weaknesses, because working on weaknesses is also important, as I've believe there is, could be wrong, is it the Ruch article that showed that working on weaknesses can be vital as well. And I think there's an important message that children have the ability to have strengths early on, and if they don't use them, they can be lost. And you know, once that sort of window of opportunity is passed, you sort of miss it. I'm just trying to look here for something for you. I can't find it at the moment, but
and that's okay if you don't. I kind of another question, just because I know before you move into the getting more into the specifics of strengths, Jim, and examples. Have you found that some strengths have a more of a developmental trajectory? I know that was kind of one of the original sort of phrases when looking at strengths in kids and in youth, is that some strengths are naturally going to be a bit lower in kids, like maybe appreciation of beauty and excellence, and maybe perspective, wisdom, that kind of thing, but that they naturally just increase over time. Do you find that that's holding up to be true, that some strengths are just have that quicker trajectory, or have more of a steep developmental trajectory versus kind of a long trajectory over time?
I believe that happens to be the case now. I think the only thing that the other studies I've done have shown that they're in agreement with the hypothesis that students at a young age are less, as you say, less commonly scoring high in prudence and wisdom and those sort of more cognitive strengths, and they're much higher in creativity, humor, teamwork, things like that. I think there are definitely, obviously, strengths which are more common when you're younger, and as we get older, we sort of grow into the more mature strengths as we go along. Hope that answers your...
Good. Okay.
I was just looking here that, yeah, getting back to your original point, that, you know, if you don't foster the strengths early, they could be lost over the course of development. So if you're focusing on just 5 strengths, then, as you say, and done in sort of a dictatorial way where you've chosen them for them, you're really narrowing the scope of what's available, and once again sort of ruling out children to be authentic and individualized and to be able to shine and flourish in those things which come natural to them. And some of them may not know which strengths those are unless they've had an opportunity to explore them. The current education system, I think, I'm not sure about in the US, but doesn't necessarily foster some of the less academic natured strengths, and a program which includes all 24 VIA strengths enables all children to find something where they fit and something where they can shine, which I think is vital.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll move on here to the slide here.
So just giving you an overview of what is Strengths Gym in the end. Basically, we have 24 lessons, one for each VIA strength. The curriculum is quite flexible with the completion of the manual, which I know you have a copy of, Brian. You're able to decide for yourself as a teacher what seems to be most suitable for the day. So being able to, similar to Seligman's positive psychology program, I know they have something similar, where you're not just doing strengths exercises, you're also doing discussion, real world homework, activities. With the help of Jenny, we have a story which goes with every strength that we've included, and a lot of philosophical discussion, thinking questions, things like that. and what we've gotten in the end for the sort of total set of materials, we have the handbook. And the handbook you can either use with the original style booklets, which created right from the pilot study, which are the students can hold and use themselves, and they can actually be reused if they're not marked in. Or most recently we've gone with the version that we sent out to you, I believe, is the one with the CD, and this enables the teachers to print out the worksheets instead. As they're focusing on a strength, they could say they were doing prudence, they could just print out the worksheet for prudence. Kids could work on it, draw on it, write on it, and then put it in a strengths booklet of their own or a binder or something like that. So that's just an overview of what it is. If you want to go to the next slide. So as I say, you know, they have a menu format. They can choose the activity that suits their needs. They have quite a lot of variety. They have in front of them all of the strengths exercises across all 3 levels of the program. Each session starts with an introduction to the strength, what are its key features, a definition, benefits of the strength, famous quotes to go along with it, philosophical thinking questions. We've got, for the classroom, we've got closing activity suggestions, display suggestions, and here in the UK we have links to the PSHE curriculum, which is sort of a citizenship program. We have our strength story, and then we have suggestions of where you might link each strength to other courses across the curriculum, which we've put in sort of to promote positive education as a whole. So happy if you want to go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we stuck with the original format for Strengths Gym of the students self-identifying with their signature strengths at the end of each of the 3 levels. They do reevaluate their strengths after they've done them and before they move on. And there's themes that run through each of the 3 levels. In the first level we have Design a Superhero. In the second level we have Strengths and Action Story. And in the third level we have Create Your Own Strengths and Action Story. Each of the first strengths builders for each year are consistent across those, and then they have an alternate strengths builder and an alternate strengths challenge, which is really the homework exercise. And on the right hand side there I have an example of a worksheet which would be printed out from Love of Beauty, and this would be the level 2 by the look of it, the year 8 level 2 in the American version, where they can remember a time that they showed their love of beauty, and they write or draw or tell a story. Then they have a exercise where they can use it. This one is Animal Beauty Contest, which I quite like this exercise. And then to look for beauty on their way to school and tell a friend or family member what they noticed. And they have a section there where they can keep their notes.
That's great. Yeah, I'll move on next slide. And any particular example that stands out to you of maybe something that one of the students did in answering one of those questions, either whether it was the Designing a Superhero or the Strengths and Action Story? I imagine there's so much interesting little cases and things you could share, but any stand out to you?
Yeah, they've written such sweet things. You know, especially one that stood out for me was one on social skills, where the little boy had written that I'm much better at making friends, and now that I've been working on my social skills, or something to that effect. And it's nice when they write something in the little notes section that they feel that they've accomplished something there on that task. And I did try to include a few quotes like that on the banner on my webpage, because some of them are very sweet. But yes, it's nice to see that they do enjoy. I think the Animal Beauty Contest, the feedback on that one has been quite fun. So ones like that have been quite enjoyable for the kids. So basically the reason that we, as you've got the slide up there, have the three sort of standing themes is so that the idea of the superhero, this gives the children a chance to think about, you can imagine yourself, if you're thinking about curiosity superhero, in order to be curious, what kind of powers or what kind of look does the superhero have to have? And this is really just to get the children thinking about, what does it mean to be curious? What if I was the epitome of curiosity, I'm the superhero, what characteristics do I have? So the first level is all about trying to get them thinking about what the strength is and using a vocabulary of strengths. And it's done in such a gentle way that hopefully they don't even have to really think about that that's what they're doing. They're just creating a superpower. The second level theme of the strengths in action story, the purpose of that is really for identification and use of their strengths. Really want them to try to identify when they have used a strength, or it's somebody they know, they can actually recall seeing them use a strength. And the idea of the third level is for recognition and identification of strengths by others. So as they get older and they're moving out into the world, is trying to notice and spot other people using their strengths and to recognize that as the differences between themselves, differences and commonalities between themselves and other people, and to appreciate those things. And the exercises, just to sum up, the exercises have all been created so that they can be done solitarily or in groups, except for perhaps teamwork, which obviously is about teamwork. So hopefully they're doing those in a team. Are you happy to keep? I'm quite conscious of the time, Ryan. Did you want to?
Sure. Yeah. We just for time. Yeah. Kind of keep trucking along. Sounds good.
Okay. I know we got off to a bit of a slow start, but still. So after having created strengths, Jim done the pilot studies and some of my other research, which you kindly mentioned at the start. I put these few slides together for those people who are wanting to work with schools. I think the most important thing that's come to mind is what I've termed here as psychoeducation. The programs are really going to be implemented by the teachers, and I know that Waters stressed this point in her review article as well. So it really is the teachers, if you're a consultant, that need to understand the approach, and they need to value it as well in order to apply it successfully. And most programs are implemented, as we said, at the classroom level, and if they're not really in tune with what's happening, it's possibly not going to come across in the right way. They're a vital component. Teacher training would be obviously a benefit, and I know I have on the right-hand side that the Penn Resiliency Program had the greatest effect when it was administered by program leaders. Training is essential. The only problem with it is that obviously a lot of the schools that need these types of programs the most don't have the money for the training or the time, and we all know that schools are working at their max already. So if materials are going to be created, I think that really they need to be user-friendly, self-explanatory, in order to be used by those who might not have had as much experience. And at least if they haven't been trained, they can read an introductory section or something so they can get up to speed as to what they're going to be teaching. I put here that consultants are not there to teach teachers how to teach. Teachers are so used to receiving materials that they haven't seen before, reading up on them and applying them. They don't really need to be taught how to do that. So if the materials are created in a way that is suitable for them, you should have a pretty good effect. And what we really want to do is to provide them with the tools to implement positive psychology techniques into their existing teaching. Another important point is that school-wide approaches are required. As I mentioned before, doing something on just one classroom level or one year level has difficulties in really getting it into the fabric of the school. So if you to have the greatest effect, the techniques need to be modeled and supported throughout the whole school through a more holistic approach. Happy for you to move along, Ryan, if you like.
Sure. And one question kind of along that slot. Is there any, if there's a teacher or administrator on the line that really is quite aligned with what you're talking about, a strength-based approach, strengths gym, and these kind of approaches, and let's say it's just them, they're the sort of the lone wolf in the school that's really interested in applying that and finding success, what do you recommend as sort of a next step for that particular individual in terms of trying to make it more wide throughout the school? Since obviously it's not something that they can just quickly convince everybody else overnight. Do you recommend calling meetings or doing something systematic? What do you think?
I think right out the first thought that pops into my mind is it's quite powerful for the people who aren't that enthusiastic to complete the VIA themselves. It's quite a powerful thing to be given your top 5 strengths, and I think if that still doesn't move them, then perhaps, as you say, a meeting or something along that lines where they could learn a bit more about it and maybe do a little bit of practice session. I mean, a lot of these activities, the interesting thing I find is that they look so simple. Going back a few slides, for instance, the strength and action stories, those look easy perhaps, just looking at them. Oh, it's, a strength and action story. But if you ever have tried to sit down and tell a story of times when you've seen other individuals using their strengths, or you yourself using them, and especially across so many, it's very challenging and quite an eye-opener in itself. So I think hopefully if they were willing to participate in a few things, you could get them on board.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Kind of really trying to put the work right there, right in the other individuals' hands, and giving them access, getting them the materials, getting them things, and that certainly could be a good catalyst.
Happy for me to?
Yes, please.
So I think the question is important to ask is what are you going to give them that they can apply once you leave? So if you have been brought in as a consultant and you're working with them, is everything going to stop once you go? Are they going to be able to continue to apply programs and approaches across the school without you? So you need to be able to give them tools that they can apply after you've left. And I know that there's quite a lot of research, especially more recently, with empirical studies of positive effects. But so far, I could be wrong here, but a lot of the schools which have been noted in the literature have had ample resources to apply to these programs. I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but I know that Geelong is a private institution. It's one of the finest schools in Australia, apparently. And it's been very successful, and I applaud the work that they're doing there, but we would like, obviously, for some of the more impoverished schools to also be able to benefit from these types of programs. And I think people need to turn their attention as to how we can make that happen, making these programs a little bit less resource heavy and making them available to everyone. I noted here, again, I'm not picking on anything in particular, but I hope I'm right in saying I think that Seligman's research on the positive psychology program came with a $2.8 million grant, but they didn't necessarily show that they increased well-being, or at least I haven't found any findings to say so. And I think this just goes to show that sometimes it isn't all about money, but maybe about the work that's being done. So we have to think about that as well. I'm only putting it out there as a point of discussion, and maybe to facilitate people to discuss it. Can we do this work without large grants? We do have the grants. Are we pressured to find the findings that will be suitable? I think there's a lot of issues there that we could open up to the floor for people to think about.
Yeah, and it brings up the idea of, is there a minimum amount of intervention that can be done to still have a desired effect? And because some of these bigger programs might be trying to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at the students and at the teachers to do, and maybe all of that isn't necessary. Maybe it could be pared down to just a little bit, and then that would save considerable amount of money and could be used in some of the more maybe more poor schools. And so that's that's interesting, and we'll have to see what comes out in terms of research over the years.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing, as you say, what's coming up. And as you say, I think that's a very good point what you just made. Sometimes the smallest thing makes the biggest difference. It doesn't necessarily have to be throwing everything at them. It might be that just one small change could facilitate sort of a spiral effect of change. Anyway, I'm happy to go to the next slide, Ryan, if you like.
Okay.
I think here, just trying to make a note that what teachers will take away from a consultant or someone working with them isn't going to be as pure positive psychology as perhaps when it first came to them. They will adapt and use it to suit their needs and sort of the ethos of the school. So they're sort of just having that in your mind, I think, is a benefit, and keeping in mind that that's going to be an inevitable aspect of working with schools. They're each individual, and teachers are all individuals, going to be doing something different, perhaps just slightly with what you've created. So the successful application of anything, especially with strengths work, is allowing them to integrate existing techniques with positive psychology techniques and with the theory, and as I put here, an infusion of teaching of positive into established school subjects. So getting an infusion in, so it's sort of an integration and a melding together of something which works well for them. If there's no questions, we can carry on if you like, Ryan.
Sure.
Quite like the review, the meta-analysis findings of PPIs by Cincinnati in 2009. It's very informative. I found it was for sort of directing me as well. Again, these are just things I've decided to thought we could look at and review as sort of tips and information for others. But they note that individuals who elect to participate experience greater gains in well-being, perhaps because they were more motivated or expected the intervention to make them happier. And going back to your thoughts on teachers who are on board, the point I took away from this, which applies in the school arena, is that it's important to consider when working with teachers in schools that their enthusiasm should have a similar effect if they're on board. If they're not on board, then any intervention probably has very little chance of success. Secondly, they note the benefits increase with age. And we've noted that this could be, as students mature, they perhaps have different strengths, but they also may be more willing to carry out interventions. Again, working with teachers, it would be helpful to remind them that their participation in the program will matter and benefit them and the students. We very much promote in Strengths Gym that teachers are co-learners. So not so much that you're dictating, as you said before, in a sort of authoritative way to students, but the teachers themselves exploring their own strengths and noting with the students which ones they feel are their top strengths, and taking the lead maybe on a day when the strength is one of their own, and stepping back on a day when a student actually is a leader in a strength, and sort of working with the children instead of being an authoritative figure on strengths. The review also notes the format matters. Individually focused with therapy programs have the most benefit, followed by group therapy, self-administered PPIs are next. Taking something from that and working with teachers in schools, those schools that have the resources to provide individual treatment will notice the greatest benefits, such as being able to work with a student on their individual top 5 strengths, as I originally set out to do, versus working with strengths in general as a class. But they note here that group-administered PPIs have the second best effect, and I think this although I'm drawing across the board without having research to back me up, I think if you can't apply, as I couldn't in the beginning, exercises tailor-made to each student's individual top 5 strengths, then really a group program is your next best bet. And I suppose individual student work after that, such as with tutors or individuals working with individual students, where they have the time to work individually. And you could do one-on-one in conjunction with group activities. You could do homework activities that are more individualized to sort of ensure that you get a broad sort of amalgamation of both of those effects. Also, that longer interventions produce the greatest gains in well-being. I've been, from the start, realized that the program really did need to be administered across the school year. Short interventions are not going to have as good gains as longer interventions. And I think, unfortunately, there's often the feeling that positive work is a sort of quicker fix. You can come in, work on something positive, and then students will feel the benefit immediately. I like to advocate, along with many others, that the interventions need to be built into the school curriculum and extended throughout the school year. And I think students, especially with the age that they're at, they need the structure and the constant reminders in order for the thoughts about strengths and the vocabulary and everything to sort of habituate into their life in that way. And finally here, just that they note that a shotgun approach is more effective than single activities. And I found, I think, that people who use strengths gym jump around a lot. They practice multiple different types of the activities that we suggest and don't just stick with one single type of, I think you mentioned if the programs are administered in a much more authoritative manner, you might say, well, we're just going to work on prudence today, and that's what we're going to work on, and this is how we're going to do it. I think there's many ways in which you could shuffle things up the way we've suggested, maybe in strengths gyms, giving them lots of variety and just picking and choosing different strengths as and when you feel it's the right time to work on them.
Okay, just for time, maybe move into the last couple slides here.
Yeah, sure. This is really just we've basically talked about most of this, just that, as I say, there are obviously pragmatics and resource constrictions to working with each child in a school's unique strengths. But as I said in the previous slide, perhaps you could find ways of recognizing which strengths are theirs and giving them exercises to take home which are more in tune with their top 5. There might be a way to do that, but it's worth considering when you're going to work with them how you want to work. As I found early on, the completion of well-being measures became quite difficult to orchestrate, getting the students all in a gym or all in a classroom at the same time so that I could ensure that the measures were completed properly, and was becoming quite difficult. And I'm very much looking forward to your much shorter BIA youth measure and plan to be able to use that. I think these shorter versions give us direction, at least give us a means to sort of get going where we would like to go with the signature strengths. Again, longer programs have better results. And there are obviously, as I mentioned just previously, there are pros and cons to both single and multiple approaches. If you're going to single focus on one thing, such as hope, you may be limiting your students' needs. If you do a multiple approach where you're going to implement many exercises across various strengths, you might have a resource constriction. So these are just, as I say, these are just some considerations to sum up. And if you want to go to the final slide. As we know, PPIs, positive psychology interventions, have been found to significantly enhance well-being and decrease depressive symptoms. And getting back to the original thoughts we have that Seligman in 2002, that building all strengths enables children to gravitate towards their top 5. And as noted by Peterson, that character strengths are not assumed to be fixed or immutable. So as you and I talked about earlier, we can assume if we're not going to focus on all of them, that there will be some loss, that some will not have been fostered and therefore could be lost over the course of development, especially if they were not one of their top strengths and they were one of their more weaker ones. And again, that research findings support a scattered approach in which individuals regularly practice multiple and different activities. That's my final point.
Okay, great, thanks. And on that one of those points, you're kind of mentioning sort of the use it or lose it approach with strengths. Do you think that that's that individuals can later tap into those sort of lost strengths, whether it be in later adolescence or early adulthood, and still be able to, kind of recapture some of that, or do you think significant loss happens?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's done any research on that to date, but certainly you would think that you could pick up a weakness if you became aware of it and definitely work on it. I remember Jenny saying to me that when she's working on a weakness, it's still a weakness, but at least she's more aware of it and is able to make note of it and use it. And I think there's something to be said for keeping in mind those areas in which we're weak and keeping them in our minds. So I think we can still keep a conscious awareness of our weaknesses and try and build on them. I'm not sure if they're lost forever. I think maybe Peterson was saying they would be lost as a potential top strength because we haven't allowed the child to gravitate in that direction by not presenting the opportunity. So again, allowing them, as Seligman originally said, in authentic happiness, in allowing them to explore everything, you're opening up all of their horizons and enabling them to gravitate to ones which are a natural fit for them and ones that feel good. As he said, ones that they want to use and use naturally anyway. And I think that's something not to be forgotten, especially with younger children. They use them quite naturally, and somewhere along the line they get lost. So
yeah,
keeping them going.
Good. Yeah, really good points. Now, in terms of the references here, you had mentioned your website is where they can get a lot of the different strengths gym materials, some of which the references are right there in front of everybody on the screen. Can you say that website again, Carmel, and if there's anything else you'd want to say about the references?
No, the references, I hope I didn't miss anything. References there should be of everything that's in the presentation. I can definitely help out if anyone's interested in any further references of anything I mentioned that I didn't include. And the web page is really easy. It's just strengthsgym.co.uk or .com, whichever you like. And we do have an Americanized version which doesn't have the PSHE links because obviously it doesn't apply. And you don't have year groups, so we've taken away the year groups and replaced it with just a 3-level 1, 2, 3 program. So it's very standardized. I
see. Yeah, and the one that I have, I think I have actually seen some of those older versions of the year 7, year 8, year 9, but the one that I have that I really like is the one that's listed under 2011 Strengths Gym, and that also is the one Carmel was mentioning that comes with a CD as well of materials that can be printed up. So it's a wonderful resource for those teachers and practitioners that want to work with strengths with any of the 24 with kids, and it's just a wealth of creative ideas and materials for all the 24 strengths right there in the book and in the CD. So it's a terrific resource.
Thanks, Ryan.
Well, and
yeah,
please go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, it's fine.
Oh, I was just going to actually conclude and thank you. So please, yeah. If there's any other
I was going to say that obviously the 2011 version, in keeping with what I've been trying to promote, was really created to be much more cost effective than the booklets, so that people could use it, you know, as a resource continuously and not have to keep purchasing something else to go with it. So that's sort of another aspect of it. But
Yeah.
thank you very much for your time.
Oh, well, thank you, Carmel, and I just want to thank you on behalf of the whole VIA community. This has been a great presentation, a wealth of information here, and we really appreciate the time in doing it, and then also all good research. We'll certainly stay tuned to future research that you'll be doing and helping to kind of inform best practices around the world with character strengths in children and youth.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Really enjoyed this. It's been great.
Okay, thank you, and take care, Carmel, and take care, everybody.